So obviously, I'm here to talk about whatever the team wants to talk about regarding events. I did have a couple folks submit requests. One of the things I think I mentioned in the email yesterday is some folks are wondering about unique ways that you guys are getting speakers for your virtual events. Obviously, a lot of times for live events, you have to deal with travel issues or you have to deal with scheduling issues. Maybe you have to pay in some cases to try to get people to speak. But, we've found with some of these virtual events we're doing, it's actually easier to get some folks to commit than has been in the past. I've in particular, we have a group called the P3C events, and we did 5 virtual events this year. And, we were able to get more government speakers than in the past, and just more folks that maybe because of the lack of travel, were able to do it. But I think there's still folks out there that are trying to figure out the best way to sign speakers up. So if anyone wants to talk about maybe what's happened in their group or their company with how you've been able to do that, we'll start there. And then, like I said, I have a couple other topics that people have asked about as well.
Yeah, I guess I can comment, having just run an event a couple of weeks back. So we're over in the UK, clearly, and I would echo the point you just made, Jennifer, about getting speakers. It actually was much easier for us, particularly from the US. And actually, I don't know if that's the case for all of you guys in the US, but for us, we had one speaker who was West Coast and therefore 8 hours different. And she was quite happy to get up at 4 in the morning and speak for us. But I'm almost certain she wouldn't have spoken had we had the event in person in London.
Mm-hmm.
So it enabled us to certainly increase the quality of what we were delivering in terms of speakers. I don't know whether that's going to continue once we come back to more physical events, and whether that sort of hybrid approach will work. But that was a recent experience for us.
Yeah.
And anyone else have experience with speakers or being able to secure them, ideas for getting unique ones?
Are you referring to speakers as like an open public thing where anybody can just come and watch and they're speaking directly to them, or is it including roundtables as well where there's participation?
Yeah, anything you found that has been good to, for your virtual event, anything that on the content side and getting your speakers or getting your moderators that you want to share with the group that you found was successful versus, having them come to a live event.
Funnily enough, I've been to quite a few that were just the speaker presenting something that have been quite well attended. But I think this is the only roundtable that I've done so far this year, that I've done twice now, that has had any sort of involvement whatsoever. The renewed ones, all the other ones I've been in have just been tumbleweed.
Yeah. Well, good for us then. We're
Yeah.
That's right. I'm going to put some of my Simplify Compliance colleagues in the spot. Rebecca, Melissa, Shannon, what have we seen any change in the engagement we're able to get from speakers now that we're more virtual, or has it just stayed the same?
Yeah, this is Rebecca Hendren. I was just about to jump in. It's been interesting. We have had a few who have bizarrely announced that they don't like virtual events and want to wait till in person, which really floored me. But most of our speakers have been incredibly receptive to the virtual events because for them it's so much easier. They don't have to travel. They don't have to, a lot of the times they don't have to even put on makeup or change out of pajamas. They love it. So they have been extremely receptive. For them, it's just an easier experience. I don't think they feel the high pressure. And they have very much enjoyed the ability to have the back and forth with attendees as well. I think it's felt a lot less formal for them. So we have had a lot of speakers who are just eager to speak anytime we do a virtual, which they wouldn't necessarily be for in person. And then we're trying to take the opportunity to branch out more to less experienced speakers as well, to give them an opportunity to speak, because I think they find it less intimidating also, not having to go to an event and stand up at a podium in front of a crowded ballroom. It's a less intimidating experience being on a virtual. So we're trying to get some more non-traditional speakers that way too.
David?
Rebecca, have you, I haven't been dealing with a lot of speakers on programs, so I've heard some of this from BVR staff, but I feel the same way you do, that if you do it well, and not in the version Lloyd's talking about where it's a more communal experience, it should be kind of less stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So I've sort of taken that opinion, but then in a couple of cases I've been surprised to hear that, you know, people who speak regularly are very, very good presenters seem almost more nervous about the virtual platform. And so if you cut corners, like not having a prep call and things like that, you can panic some of your experts. Have you, so, I mean, that's just, you know, bad judgment on my part, because I'm kind of, you know, it's only 30 minutes, we'll just wing it kind of, you know, and you realize that that is terrifying, somebody you really want to have on your program.
No, exactly. And I think many of us, probably everybody on this call, is so familiar with being on Zooms or on Teams or anything. It's not a big deal. And it is easy to forget that not all our audience feels the same way. And so having to be on a screen like what we're looking at right now for them is a big deal and is intimidating. And just the whole technological side of it. Or sometimes we're dealing with, you know, we might be dealing with a speaker who lives out in the middle of nowhere and has never been a problem before because, well, they'll just get on a plane, but now they're trying to do it from their farm in the middle of wherever, and they'd have terrible internet connection and things like that. So there's all sorts of things to take into consideration, but definitely people's unfamiliarity with the medium is a huge hurdle to overcome.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
this
we
is
found
what,
that too. Go ahead, Wendy. Yep.
oh, no, I was just going to add briefly to that, that it's also different being on a call like this, where you're just talking versus when you're presenting, because sometimes I've been in the role of, I might not have slides, but I have to be the talker and I don't know all of the people, you know, and that kind of thing. It's different when all of a sudden you feel like you could be on a stage.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to say, we found that too. We have a couple of different platforms we're using for virtual, and we've done the speaker open houses where it's like, hey, come Monday or come Tuesday from 4 to 5. We'll show you everything. We'll go through it all with you. And inevitably, I mean, it happened in every single event we had. Even when people came, maybe they came and they were at their house, but then the day of, they decided to go to their organization. And guess what? Their organization then has a VPN that's restricting them from getting access to what we just practiced the day before. So yeah, I 100% agree. Like you definitely have to walk them through it. We have people within it every single session. If it is a presentation session, we have people in the background, which means that we've pulled people in from all over my company to like make sure that someone is in the room with them for that very reason. One thing I was going to ask too, kind of similar to what we were just talking about, you know, most of us are super excited that the vaccines are starting to come out for our healthcare workers and first responders, and hopefully down the road we'll all be lucky enough to get one maybe in the spring or early summer. How are you guys feeling about the first half of next year? Are you hearing from your constituents that, hey, you know, virtual was great while we were all stuck in a pandemic, but now that there's potential for live, you know, at the end of next year, I'm not sure I really want to do your virtual event in March or April. You know, are you guys hearing that, or are people saying like, hey, we're still not sure what's going on, so we're happy to participate? Anyone have feedback on that?
Yeah, this is Jim Malpas. We're part of Simplify Compliance too. You know, our events are small executive networking events. I've mentioned them before, and they're health system executives. So right now they've got more important things to deal with. And, you know, I've got a roundtable with 3 CEOs this afternoon, but, you know, we actually we ask of their time very carefully right now. But you're talking about next spring, we have 3 events next spring. that are traditional exchange events, we call them. We had one that was in March that we pushed back to May. So right now we have late April through mid-May for 3 of these executive level events. And so far, our recruiting for those events has gone very well, somewhat surprisingly. We have close to, I think we have 2/3 of the number of attendees we need for our annual CFO exchange for health system CFOs. And the responses we're getting are generally yes, they're always with the caveat, assuming everything is going okay, we look forward to it. We are seeing some, particularly from major health systems and some from our vendors and our supporters, sponsors, that there's still travel restrictions for the first 2 quarters of next year. And those are somewhat fudgeable. I mean, they're in place now. We'll call them again in March to see how that looks. But so far we're encouraged. Yeah, I mean, we think the first quarter is just going to be very difficult, obviously. But I think folks will start to we're hoping anyway, and seeing early indications that they're getting back on the road, particularly later in the spring and into the 3rd and 4th quarter.
Yeah, we actually did a survey. Of course, this was before the vaccine came out, and the majority of respondents said they weren't comfortable traveling until 3rd or 4th quarter, just in general, because of travel restrictions at their companies and everything else. They just didn't see those being lifted until later in the year. So we actually moved our big event, from the spring to the fall for that exact reason.
We're seeing a lot of survey responses like that whether or not they have actual travel restrictions from their company, that they don't feel comfortable with even thinking about an event until 3rd or 4th quarter. So we were able to move our bigger conferences to the 3rd or 4th quarter. And that's what, people are backing us up with that, saying that, whether we can travel or not, I personally don't want to until later in the year.
Right. Till they feel safe.
And I think the challenge that brings up is, I think probably everybody on this call, if you do a large conference or a trade show, you expect orders to start coming in a certain number of months out. And I think that's kind of off the table right now, because even for an event we have in August, we would probably start to expect a meaningful number of orders come in February. I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty then. And I can't imagine, if people don't know that when they're getting the vaccine, or if they still have travel restrictions in place, they may be purchasing much, much later than they usually do, which, when you've committed to a room block, you've committed to space, you've committed to vendors, is a pretty scary prospect.
Absolutely. In fact, we had 2 clients just overnight for an event we were thinking of having at the end of May. 2 months ago said, yeah, May sounds great. And now they're like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. So thank God we didn't sign the contract yet. But yeah, I mean, people are changing their minds. And same thing, even the ones they said, well, if you have it in May, we're just not going to commit right away. We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, definitely already.
We're seeing the back end of that challenge as well. In our industry, there have been events, fleeing like rats off a ship into the 3rd and 4th quarter. Yep. And that's just really causing a backlog. One of pretty much the major technology event in our space is HIMSS. They've already moved from traditionally in February all the way back until the fall, and other major conferences are doing that as well. So, we have an event competitor calendar, and, we're holding the line at those April and May events, in part because we don't want to push them back into a very crowded Q3 and 4 calendar, where we have plenty of events of our own there as well. So, and our sponsors are a big part of that too. They're not going to want to support events where, they have to be at 3 different events in 2 weeks.
Right.
So that's a further fun dynamic.
David, I know you had some questions about what folks have been figuring out with hotels. So, I want to put kind of in that vein where we know, many of us are tipping the scales for the end of the year. And in some cases, we're able to get favorable conditions from the hotels. Like, we've gotten some room blocks that we've been able to minimize, and some, they're coming off of their F&B minimums a little better than in the past. But you know, are you guys finding that the hotels are still kind of in control here, or are you able to have some additional say? And I don't know, David, if I'm getting your question correct, maybe you want to jump in.
No, that's right. And I think of the people on this call, we probably do the least events business. So, you know, maybe I can chime in this issue sort of, you know, to some degree as an outsider, but it you know, kind of taking the long view of our events business. And the one good thing about the COVID crisis is, I haven't written a single large check to a hotel since it started. and the idea that communities like this, you know, maybe we can band together, you know, and sort of publicize that the hotels have, you know, think of all the time we talked about how to avoid getting screwed over on AV charges and, you know, whatever, you know, the $65 cup of coffee and all the hostilities, the guarantees, the fact that the hotels really tried hard not to observe force majeure, you know, for the most part, you know, in, you know, clearly legally questionable status, so did the insurance companies. But just, you know, I hear so many people, Jen, I know you guys are trying to get back to the live events and so many people are, and I just wonder if there's a chance for sort of a converted or concerted publicity campaign saying, you guys have had the upper hand for a very long time. We're not going back to business as usual, you know, kind of thing at this point. I don't know if that's, you know, it's a far fetch. None of us are the Marriott chain and none of us are the Las Vegas hotel people, but I really feel like, you know, maybe we can get a little bit of a balancing of the tables, you know, and obviously part of the frustration in that comment comes out of, you know, letters from lawyers we've been receiving informing us that, you know, our various hotel contracts are completely enforceable and we have to pay the minimums even though the events haven't occurred. You know, we're not doing that, but you know, you're sort of really, you know, nobody can even get to Las Vegas right now. So anyway, just, you know, for all of us who are trying to get back to live events, like, you know, maybe there's some political action we can take here. Was kind of the point I raised with you, Jen.
Yeah, anybody want to weigh in on that?
Is anyone planning on doing mixed events to combat that? I mean, so part physical, part virtual, just trying to get as many people as possible. I haven't seen anybody planning that.
We just did that in November with one of ours.
Really? Yeah. How well is that going?
There were more people virtually, as you can imagine, because in November, still nobody wants to go anywhere. I don't blame them. So it's still more virtual, but we were able, the hotel was just thrilled. It was an event we had in Texas. I actually did not go. I stayed virtual, but our Texas team went out there. And they, you know, the hotel was thrilled to have us there. But it was probably a third of the people that normally would come. And then, you know, 2/3 were still virtual.
This is Shannon Strello with Simplify Compliance. I've been a little hesitant for the hybrid model just because of the expense that is accompanying that. And also, Jennifer, to your exact point, is I feel the majority of people, and you know, to earlier parts of this conversation, they're going to say, you know what, maybe I'm not feeling comfortable, and if I can get the exact same opportunity virtually, I'm going to take that in 2021. Yeah. So we've really, you know, kind of said, if we have the contractual obligation with the hotel, and I believe it, you know, David, it was your question. Yeah. A lot of what I'm seeing, you know, and we had, I think I moved, or at least I had 35 plus conversations with hotels to move or to, you know, seek force majeure, you know, for what we had on the books for 2020. A majority of that, you know, was relieved. A majority, you know, half of it did get moved into 2021. So I don't know that we'll see this shift with from the hotel's perspective, perhaps until 2022, because so many organizations like Simplify Compliance and many of you on this call probably had to do something like that and said, you know, we will relieve the damages, but we really need to keep your business. So we'll pick it up and we'll put it into 2021. So even for, you know, we only had approximately, you know, less than 5 new events for Q3, Q4 that we were booking that we didn't have an obligation from 2020. And they're looking at me going, I really don't have the availability because so many organizations picked up and put it down. So 2022 is where I think we will see a movement. I mean, there was already talks in the industry that it was going to shift into, you know, the group's favor from the hotel, just because there's so much new properties, you know, surfacing in Nashville is a great example. There are so many brand new hotels in Nashville, and before you couldn't, you know, you really couldn't touch the city. For our largest annual practice conference, you know, they would tell us, you know, yeah, we'll talk to you in 2024. And this was back in 2019, you know, but I think that's going to change. I think those 2022 and maybe, so the conversations will happen in 2021, but I do think we'll be able to move it, you know, into our favor. And I will just say, I've had really good luck with just real sincere transparency in conversations with my hotel reps and saying, listen, we're committed to our events portfolio. You need us just like we need you. So I need you to work with me on attrition rates. So typically you'd see, you know, 85 to 80%. They're agreeing to 70%. They're agreeing to, you know, attrition on F&B. So these are the things to just, you don't know until you ask. So it's really on us to like really raise our negotiation skills and say, you know, if you want us, you need to help us, you know.
And
so.
Shannon, that was breathtaking. That was gorgeous to listen to. Like I rally around the flag on that one, man. So good for you.
One of the things that came up on the Slack channel, thank you to Matthew for pointing it out to me. I think it was a question posed by Stephanie. For those of you who are selling events for late 2021, which is what we're talking about, knowing it may be a while before we know if it's live or virtual, are you putting both prices in the prospectus and asking them to commit to virtual if you cannot do live? So question being, how are you pitching next year for your sponsors? And just like, you know, we talked about before, the attendees aren't necessarily committing to travel, neither are the sponsors right now. They're all waiting until later, till they decide if they're going to plunk their money down. But are you guys finding that by offering them the virtual plus a live, or hey, if it's not live, it'll be virtual, is that helping? Does anyone want to chime in on that? Rebecca?
What we've done over at Simplify Compliance with the majority of our events is we're actively planning now for our Q3, Q4 conferences and starting to let people know about what's coming and building our agendas and so forth. And we're letting them know that there will be some virtual component, but we're not promoting that heavily at this point and don't plan to do so for a little bit. We don't want to incentivize people into not going by having very robust virtual offerings. But we do recognize that a lot of people won't be able to, don't want to travel. And we also want to have an option already set up and in place in case we do have to pivot to fully virtual. So pretty much all of our events are going to have a virtual component that will be done as a separate event. It will be related to, but it won't be the same thing. So it won't be the exact same experience, the exact same content you can get in person. But it will be a virtual component, either a week, a month after the in-person. And as a incentive for folks to attend the in-person, they will get that virtual content for free. So it'll be a bonus for them. And then for folks who can't come, won't come, we'll also have that virtual component. It won't be nearly as extensive, but it will be very useful and valuable content. And also the thought is, you know, for if we have to make changes, we've already got that planned. So for example, one of our big conferences, we normally have 6 tracks. We're planning 4 tracks in person and 2 tracks virtual. And everybody who attends in person will get those bonus tracks. And it also means we can pivot very easily if we need to.
Are you making access time limited? I mean, one of the things that,
yes.
Yeah, right. So one of the key things for those who have, you may have already thought of this, but the way to do this sensibly is probably to start making it, if you paid for the live, to not make the virtual a permanently open opportunity. Otherwise, and vice versa. If you do that, you'll have a better chance of actually being able to monetize this year long. So you're able to take portions of that and turn it into new content that that you can also charge for. And that seems to be a best practice at this point. Of course, best practices are sort of happening as we speak, but yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we're finding a lot of the events that we have done at the end of 2020, now we're reaching the end of the access for that. And so we're thinking, well, this is still good content. What else are we going to do with it? So there's a lot of, if you look at our overall audience, only a small majority of them actually accessed it. So we're looking at other ways we can package those, because there's a lot of very good content that we now have our hands on.
I think she just made a really good point. Very few are making use of it. So that means let's us make use of it. Let's us repackage and think through what that might look like. I think it would be interesting, not this call, but if we had a different call, to talk about that kind of packaging of that content.
Yes.
And how we can maximize that.
Can I ask something slightly off the content topic? Because
I'm sorry, Lloyd, can we just real quick go back to Ellen, who had a question, I think, and then we'll go to you. Absolutely.
Okay, sure. Yep.
Yeah, I was actually just going to answer the question as well. As far as what we're doing from a sponsorship perspective, looking at 2021 and trying to still get the business in, we've taken a new approach and incorporated a lot of media into our on-site event sponsorship. So it's one of those, like, a lot of times they get a speaking position at the event plus this, this, and this. Well, we're adding into that. You can also have a speaking position in a webinar pre-event. So you're getting pre-event exposure online virtually. They know it's going to happen, and you're going to have exposure on site at the event as a speaker on a panel. And also we're offering, banner ads and e-newsletters and different things like that, so that we're selling it as a year-long marketing plan and not just an event sponsorship. So it's like you're getting this marketing plan that starts in January, and it's going to carry you all the way into October when you get to meet on site with these people face to face that we've kind of brought from the top of the funnel down. So that's kind of how we're looking at it going into 2021 for our events. For sponsorships and for speakers, when we're recruiting speakers, we're asking that they commit to either in person or virtual, depending on what happens. And we did that for our event in the latter part of 2020, and it worked perfectly. We didn't have any of our speakers back out for this one specific event because they knew that they were going to have to be counted on for a virtual event as well. So that's how we've kind of handled it, and we're continuing to do
interesting
that this year.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Lloyd, did you have a question?
Yeah, so basically what Ellen was just saying then about all the content. I've been to quite a few events that have all been obviously virtual, and the content seems to be like it's got better in a virtual environment because you've got more access to it, and people have been focusing on making better content and giving away the content to get people to attend. But on the flip side of it, I feel like what events seem to be missing in a virtual environment is, it's even apparent in this conversation when you have a roundtable event, for example, you don't get that level of networking where, say you're just walking down a corridor and you bump into someone that you saw last year and hi, how's it been? Or like in this conversation where everybody's talking, one person's talking, everyone stops and listens, nobody's having little side conversations here and there. And how are people getting around that side of it? Because it feels like the bit that the virtual events is completely missing is one of the key components of physical events, that you just have those off the cuff conversations where you've bumped into people. And I've found it quite difficult actually to really get personal with people. If anybody knows an answer to that.
No, you're not wrong. And I think, you know, we've tried to overcome that in one of our platforms. We've used a company called Remo, R-E-M-O, and they offer an opportunity where you can go to roundtables within the platform, and it's video. So if I go to the networking hall, the quote, not the exhibit hall, but the networking hall, I can go into a table and I can video conference with Ellen or Lloyd or Jacqueline or anyone that happens to be at that same table. And so we have found that pretty successful, because a lot of times after the speakers finish talking for their session, we'll say, oh, join us in the networking hall, table 5, and the speakers will be there afterwards if any of you want to connect with them one-on-one. Again, it's still video, it's still a Zoom type thing, but yeah, it's kind of the best we can do at this point to, you know, that is the value proposition of a live event, right? So that's the challenge. But
I think Jennifer, I'm sorry, Jennifer.
No, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jennifer makes a really good point there. One of the things that you do when you're at a conference, now sometimes you run into somebody in the hallway, but often it's because you already know them. What can happen, and happened last week or two ago at Connective, is we tried, BIM, there was a BIMS conference. And one of the things that we tried doing was having a post-session conversation at the stage. And so you could come and you could talk with the speakers. You could see the other people who were interested at coming to talk to the speaker further about what they were talking about. And the upside of that was the opportunity to literally see the other people, to have their name on the screen, so to know who they are, and to have the opportunity to trade contact information around a specific piece of content, something that relates to what you do. So it's not, it's almost, from my perspective, it seems better than running into a rando in the hallway who may or may not have enjoyed the last session you just sat through. You know, you can laugh about it with the stranger in the hallway and go, boy, that was crap, you know. But you could, on the other hand, if you're meeting and just wanting to talk to the speaker, hear that person, ask their questions. You get a better sense and a feel for your fellow attendee, and a reason to continue further conversation down the road by trading information, or most of these platforms, connecting with them through the attendee connection opportunity.
Matthew, I have a question. That was that Perform Media platform?
Yes.
That was.
I'm sorry, I joined late. I was in another meeting and we were talking about all these same things. How did that Perform Media platform work out in general for you?
I haven't looked at all the audience responses, and I know that some of the people who used it were on this call, including Helen. I think that probably Elizabeth may have participated in that. Jennifer, I don't know, were you there as well? Lloyd?
Joyce, though.
I was there.
Yeah.
We sponsored the event as well.
And for those of you who did use it, did you use the attendee to attendee connection? Did you find it useful? And then in the end, did you spend time going into the come to the stage moments where you could talk with a speaker one-on-one or a small group like this?
I did. I really liked that come to the stage feature. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I thought that was really well done. And they used Perform Media, just incorporated a Zoom feature into their platform with that. And yeah, that was great. And I agree with you that it brought the people in, you know, you wanted to talk more about that topic. So it was sort of like that round table, but it was, you know, generated by the talk. I did use the I use the one-to-one. One-to-ones are awkward because they end up having to connect to like, where do I get them? Where did the message come to? And theirs was your message got delivered by email, but you couldn't respond to it.
You couldn't respond to it.
I thought that
was unfortunate.
Yeah, it was odd. We used a platform that the one-to-one didn't work out really well either. So it's, there's got to be one out there somewhere. We used Swoogo.
Swoogo, yeah. Swoogo.
SWOOGO.
My God, the names.
I know. It's great. Yeah, the random name generators are working overtime.
Random name generator. That's what I'm going to call. I'm going to create a company. I'm going to put it in
random name generator. Yeah. Although there's people who make big bucks off of that. So anyway, but yeah. So for William Haight, I joined late too, so I was on another call. But yeah, I thought the Perform Media, I was kind of impressed with that. with their aspects of, like I said, I really liked the come to the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a very
Well,
nice.
thanks, Joyce. We spent time developing that and trying to figure out how to make it work. And I'll tell you, poor Charity Huff in the first 2 sessions, we had connectivity problems. It was all, so, you know, there was a learning curve. So I'm glad that by the time you joined, it was functional. And
Oh, I'll tell you, you know, yeah, that's it. For any of you who haven't done one of these yet. Yeah, it's the learning curve is, it's steep and harsh. What you're really doing is you're producing live TV.
You are.
You
Yeah.
really are.
I think that's well said. Well said.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's what people
who
don't really
watch live TV and it goes out and doesn't work get really pissed off and they don't come back.
They don't come back. Yeah. So I think
see it in attendance drop off by days 2 and 3. And for those of you building multi-day conferences, be aware of that. You'll want to think about how you can continue to drive attendance to your speakers. No matter how good the content is, if there are glitches on day 1, sometimes people will tune out on day 3.
Yeah,
they're like, meh.
I think that live chat feature for technical issues is really important. I like the, I do like the running chat that you can do, you know, have anything in, but I think that makes it harder for your technical people to sift through. So, you know, we used Zendesk for ours and just to have those kinds of things, but you know, there were people that included things in the other ones too. But I think
that's super important. I actually am the help desk for a lot of my events. And no, but I mean, I get the same questions every single event. Like, well, how do I log in, or where's the session, or how do I find this? You know, things like that. Along with, hey, I can't get in. Okay, turn off your company VPN. Make sure your IT department can go to YouTube. Like now I know I'm not, and for anyone that knows me, including my husband who laughs, I'm not super technical, but like you do get the same questions all the time. And so, but that's super important. That customer experience on day 1, I cannot overemphasize that. Like, thank God every problem we've had has not been on day 1, because then you're screwed. Then people just don't trust it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's super important.
That's really, you're right. The day 1 was just a killer.
Yeah. And we would have people like real tech people from the platform. I'd pay for them on day 1. I didn't need them on day 2 or 3. But one question too that came up, somebody mentioned that when they go back live, obviously we all know we're going to have to space out more, right? We're going to, in some cases, for those of us that have pushed forward contracts to 2021, we may have the same space as we had last year or in 2019. So you can't necessarily have more space. So what are you guys thinking about for your events in the fall next year? Are you going to charge more to attendees because there will be less of them? Are you going to charge more to your sponsors? Are you going to charge less for the same reason? Like, what are people thinking about that? Or is anyone thinking about that?
We've built those things into our budget.
Yeah.
You know, we've built the additional requirements that we're going to have to deal. The first live event that we're planning for is a smaller one. It's like 200 people in July.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then the big event that that it's in the budget for is a 3,500 person event and trade show in September.
And so are you already looking at a price increase then, knowing you're going to have less people than you had before for that same event in July or September, or no?
I don't think they've looked at it that way. I think, you know, again, it's built into the budget, and I think it's just a matter of saying, well, you know, this is what we charge, and it's difficult to pass that on.
Right.
So it's an interesting question. It's one
I mean, we're having the same issues, right? Some cases I'm able to get more space and it's not a big deal. In other cases, that's where we're going back to the hotel. And if I can only have 100 people where I had 150 last year, okay, well, I'm not going to get the same revenue. So can you knock some, you know, help me out with the minimums, right? Or can you help me out? Or maybe, I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it before, but I wrote it down because it was a good idea about having 4 tracks live and 2 tracks online, right? So maybe next year you decide, okay, well, I don't need 6 tracks anymore, so I don't need as many rooms, I don't need as much AV, so that's going to help me, right? So I was just curious what people are thinking. And the same with sponsors, you know, do you go back to a sponsor and say, well, I'm sorry, we're gonna have less people because we have to be socially distanced, but by goodness, we're gonna get the right ones there for you. So, you know, now you have to pay us the same rate or a different rate. I just was curious what folks are thinking there. Anyone else?
I can jump in from the standpoint of a vendor and a prospective vendor.
Yeah.
With my company, is we're looking at smaller niche events, or were before the world shut down. Certainly, and again, we work in the life sciences space. So pharmaceutical companies, vendors supporting drug development. I'm getting a lot of that pitch, particularly for Q3 and Q4. The world will open up, and the people who will show up are the right people. So I'm not seeing any discounting right now, and I'm extraordinarily skeptical. For one, because A, it's hard, and B, and Jim Mulpus, hi Jim, alluded to this a little bit earlier. Again, I think it's important for everyone to consider the audience of who's going to be there, and when you're recruiting speakers. Obviously, because of the pandemic, everyone has some impact and isn't freely going outside. But what if you have an event with people working in drug development or leaders in hospitals? Chances are they're less likely to go anywhere, forget about travel restrictions, or frontline nurses who usually speak at an event, than before. A lot of what I do relates to events that include patients and caregivers. Somebody whose immune system is shot is not going to Vegas to headline a conference. They're just not for an amount of time. And I see a lot of conference companies talking to me as if that the speaker lineup, the advisors, et cetera, is business as usual. And
I think you're right. And I think that's the biggest challenge we all have as event planners. Most of us is, you know, you can talk to you know, companies like yours, John, or you can talk to your sponsors, you can talk to your speakers, but no one knows what those attendees are going to do. Nobody knows until it happens. And so a lot of times companies will pre-plan. We pre-plan with the Marriotts, you pre-plan with us. We all plan, but then until we know a month or two before, that's the $1 million question. And that would be a reason to offer the virtual / live, which I know, you know, my company, we're not super thrilled with it either, but we have found that we can do it. It's just, you know, you charge a little more with the AV, but that would be that capability to just let folks decide, hey, guess what? If you're live, you're going to get the networking opportunity. You're going to get to talk to the speakers immediately. You're going to go out to dinner with folks or go to a reception. If you're virtual, you may not have access to those people live in the room, but you'll still be able to, you know, consume all the content. You can still reach out to people virtually, but it's tough. I don't know what others are thinking on that.
I think the real impact for us, and maybe, I'm sorry I was late, and maybe you talked about this earlier, the impact for us was we saw the increased engagement that we were able to get with our international audience with a virtual event.
Very good point.
And that's something that we know is going to still be very much in doubt for next year for live events. So that's what's driving our virtual, our hybrid kinds of components, is to be able to include our global audience.
To answer your question, hey, John, thanks again. You know, I think one of the things we're looking at is that we don't really look at the events themselves as having to contain all that revenue pressure. So, you know, for example, we sort of look at our live events in 2021 and even into 2022 as being part of a longer program, that all of our virtual events connect to that live event. They lead into it in some way. They have a facet to the learning exchange of the virtual event that's appropriate for virtual and that feeds into the live event. And they're spaced out that way. They're marketed that way. At least we're trying, and that's what we're rolling out. We're looking at events going forward. I don't know, in our particular part of the industry, I don't expect those major conferences, the big ones, to ever be the same. I mean, I can't imagine 15,000 people in an exhibit hall in Las Vegas at HIMSS or HFMA or something like that. It just doesn't fit the times. So you're seeing these event companies, doing all sorts of calisthenics to, these virtual exhibit halls and things like that. Our position is, use virtual events where they fit best, make it sort of part of the community and the program. But yeah, we don't really have the luxury of going to our sponsors and asking for more money. I don't know that they're going to be that responsive. And like John, they're waiting to see where things land.
Can I ask Jim Mulpus about if I remember from a session I think I saw you do on how your events work, you often hold them at resort areas for high-end hospital leaders or perhaps nursing leaders. And if I recall, a big piece of your live experience is that I'm in this space, I can have a golf experience, a spa experience, or whatever experience. That's not recreatable in these environments. But I would also think that how much does get lost? I would think in an environment like we're sitting in right now, that would be even better for healthcare professionals who are at C-suite people. Is that true, or am I or is it not for what you've seen in your virtual?
Going forward, here's the thing. One of the things we've really liked about the virtual events, just in our part of the company and others, is you can't make them interactive enough. The more interactive you make them, the more you try to replicate that idea exchange, whatever it is. It just pays dividends. People feel more connected to the community. We've been very successful in inserting our sponsors into that type of dialogue. I've got a roundtable this afternoon. It's 3 CEOs and 1 sponsor. That's it.
Wow.
And we get
nice for that sponsor. That's talk about high touch.
And the margin on that is, considering the expense, it's pretty good. The smaller events, we feel very strongly that these, yes, they are resort. Shannon, our terrific Shannon, like I said, has been on the phone with 35 different resorts, pushing,
God
shoving.
bless you, Shannon. My
Yeah.
God.
Oh gosh, you're the best. I don't know how they do it, but we're able to renegotiate those contracts and move them. And, we feel like that if our executives are going to start going back to conferences, we've already talked about the safety protocols, how small the events are, how we're going to keep everyone as distant as we can be and intimate and all that. So we feel we've got a little bit of a hedge against, a larger event where they're relying on the exhibit hall. We don't have to worry about that.
Yep, absolutely.
And you can play, some of the things that we like to do in terms of activities, you can still do. You can still hike, you can still play golf. All of that is fairly doable. Networking receptions, though, that's the part we haven't figured out. Networking receptions are going to be tough.
Yep, sorry. I was just gonna say, we have about 10 minutes left. Is there another question anyone had? I've been looking at the chat online.
Yeah, I actually have a question for people on this call who may have been thinking about how to use your speakers to drive actual attendance, not registration. Register's great, but you really want people participating in these. And I'm thinking about promos that have worked. We were just having a conversation yesterday about how to ensure engagement so people do truly engage during a workshop. I'm wondering if people have figured out if you can, first you're asking a speaker now more, you're asking them to do more. 2, you have to get them to say the right thing so that it works. And 3, many of them hate being scripted and overly handheld. So what experiences has anybody had? Has anybody been thinking about what they might do if they haven't done it? And what successes or failures have you seen? Is there anyone who can share anything? We might not be there yet, but.
I think it's a great question you pose. It's not dissimilar from me moderating this session, right? I'm like, okay, I've got to keep everybody engaged for an hour. So it's, and I'm in the business, right? So I think it's definitely difficult when you're asking people who have a day job that's maybe not.
You feel like you want to walk today, that would be great.
Yeah. And I think that some of these people are sometimes higher level people who are going to draw a lot of your audience. If you're going to be sitting in a situation like this as a professional, as a C-suite person, you might be looking more like that than that, because you're like, I don't really want, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm a C-suite person. I really don't want my name attached to this question. I got a lot of questions. How do we provide our speakers that opportunity? How do we provide attendees the opportunity? Because the second it feels static, like it's just my speaker talking, we're back to sit and get. And if we turn virtual into a sit and get experience and can't create that, both the frisson, that's a French word, I don't know how to say it, and the, at the same time, the collegiality, we're not giving people the experience they need. And anything we can do to work around that by having an opening video that you get in an email that comes to you pre-event that says, here's how I want you to join me. Like bring that personality of that speaker into the attendee experience. That delegate will have a better experience. And I haven't wrapped my brain around where we are there, but I know I think we need it, especially moving forward, because to the extent that companies are making money during virtual events, rushing back to in-person live may be leaving a lot of money on the table. I don't know if I want to do that. There's still so much in virtual that can bring revenue back, even after we're in person, even after vaccines work.
Well, Matthew, I think, from BIM's last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever it was very interesting to hear how many people saying they weren't going to abandon virtual events, even when and if things go back to normal. That this would be part of their normal, doing virtual events. So I think that we're all thinking that we don't want to leave money on the table by abandoning them. To the speaker engagement, the event that we had, the first event we had this year, and it really just happened serendipitously because we deal in a small enough industry that a lot of people know, they know everybody. And we had 2 panel discussions that were just fabulous because of the speaker interaction with each other. And we got great reviews and great comments back from attendees saying, we really liked that. It was so great because they talked to each other, not just to the audience. So that was an interesting twist. And you're right, these people don't like to be scripted. They don't like to be told what to do. But that's something to consider. And
I think that's quite important, is the relationship between the moderator and the speaker.
That too. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. We're trying to develop some of our editorial staff into better video interviewers for that reason. That's a really great technique. BIM's used it last week. They used one of their folks, and the keynote wasn't a keynote. The keynote was a Q&A session between the person and then, which was a great thing. We've already spread that around, and we've got a couple of editors saying, what fresh hell is this? But we have a couple of the younger ones saying, cool, I could do that. I could do that. I'd love to do that. So, I think that's it too.
It's a great point. Like, we all know who worked great live and which ones we're like, oh, thanks, but maybe next year we won't invite them back, right? Because they're boring or they're dull. It's the same thing on virtual. Like, you have some people that literally have just come alive on virtual, and they maybe introverts even at your company that you're like, wow, I could never put them on a stage, but on this video, they're killing it. And I think you're right. Like, it's a different type of person, and it's also a different way to engage with them. Rebecca, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We have had some of our best sessions are because of our editors who are subject matter experts on their own, who are able to tease that information out of the speakers and bring it together in a cohesive whole, maybe by looping a couple of speakers together who may not know each other. But it's been absolutely dynamic on screen. It sounds like something that's pretty simple, but it actually ends up being some of the most compelling programming. And I did want to briefly mention something fun that we did last week in an event, and Melissa is on this call as well, but we had a theme for our event with a sort of a scavenger hunt type thing where people had to collect clues as we went through the event, and then we brought them together into breakout groups, and we had facilitators who had to try and get people to put their clues together, and we worked through them with that. But that was just it was a very interesting and different way to engage people with the content. They had to stay focused. They had these extra little things that they had to find throughout. And we definitely learned a lot of things that I think we're going to continue to use next year. But for an experiment, it worked very well.
Rebecca, did you incentivize them? Did they get a $100 Visa gift card?
No,
cetera?
they just enjoyed the experience of
Okay.
digging up the clues and putting it together.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did something similar for each of our events. They just so happened to relate to a holiday. So I think we had one around Thanksgiving. So we put pumpkins in the exhibit halls and we called them, I don't know, the peanut characters or whatever. And then we had like, you know, turkeys for the Thanksgiving one, but same kind of thing. Although we did incentivize, I think we said it was, you know, if you find all 3 pumpkins, you'll be entered in a drawing for a $100 gift card. We didn't get a ton, but we did get people that, you know, because they had to go to the help desk to say they found the pumpkins. So it was kind of fun, but, you know, again, that's where it's difficult. You can't replicate an exhibit hall virtually very easily. So like that was sort of one way to try to get people in there to surf around and do stuff. But great. Any other final comments from anyone before we adjourn for what hopefully will be a better year in 2021?